Hello everyone, this is Sasha from Virtual Performance Tool, and I would like to welcome you to this very first of a series of videos talking about the new VPT 1.0.0. In today's program, we're going to talk about what's new in this version, the 1.0.0. We're going to talk about who's the new data provider and the deal signed with him. We're going to talk about airport databases in general, and we'll talk about performance database and performance calculation system in more deep. We'll finally talk about the pricing, which may or may not change, so stay tuned for that. And finally, we're going to finish this video talking about the next videos, what to expect, when to expect them. So VPT 1.0.0 is a brand new version that will be available in the next weeks or months after the alpha and beta tests are completed. And the big changes is obviously this new data provider. I'll talk about it in the next slides. To implement this new provider, we have rewritten now about 90% of the systems. We have reworked our API, the takeoff and landing, obviously, but also we took the time to rework the weight and balance systems. We have reworked also the aircraft profiles. This is why the fleet app has not been released yet, because the new profiles are completely different from the current ones, which make the fleet app incompatible with the old pre-VPT 1.0.0 versions. And of course, this new version is the new basement for all the upcoming aircrafts. And finally, we have some surprises. We'll talk about some next videos. So, who is the provider? The provider doesn't want to be mentioned, but what I can tell you that he worked for major airlines, and he's currently providing the airport database and some performance calculation from some major airlines. He has about 20 years of experience in the performance department, and he's currently captain on the 737. And he has some great colleagues, which are some of them also part of the airline industry. So what is this deal? First of all, the provider will give us a new airport database, which will contain roughly 3,000 airports, and more are expected to come with the near future, and depending about the community requests. It features daily updates and a 24/7 NOTAM monitoring. We're going to go in deep in the next slides. And also very important, and the new airport database will come as an aircraft-based airport database. So each aircraft will have its own list of airports and its own list of engine failure procedures. The new deal will also come with the new aircraft performance database, which is pretty neat. We'll have some spot-on results, additional performance information. We're going to talk all about that very shortly. A large variety of aircrafts and extremely advanced engine failure procedure calculation, taking into account like great and loss in turns, wingspans, engine failure based in worst case for turns, turn radius, and much more. But before we proceed with the next slides, it was pretty much important to me to differentiate the airport database found in Iraq and the performance database we use, because I have been asked quite some times, why don't we simply use the Navigraph database? And the answer is actually pretty straightforward and pretty easy, is that Navigraph doesn't have what it takes to do accurate performance calculations. And to explain that in a bit more details, let's have a look on this next slide to compare what the ERAC database is and what are the performance database. So let's start with the ERAC. So what you must know about the ERAC is it's based on the AIP, and all the updates are planned well in advance by the competent authorities. It's mainly regarding airspace and navigation aids, new or outdated VOR NDBs. Of course, there are some information regarding runway and taxiways. So if there's new runway, identification change, new length, that will be included in the ERAC. And the ERAC will also update the SID and stars. But as you can see, there's not much about it that is very relevant to performance except the runway and taxiway part. What we need for the performance database is a database updated and based on, of course, the IAP, but also the NOTAM, because the IAP is planned way ahead, and sometimes you have obstacles that are made overnight, and those will be included in the NOTAMs. So we need a database that will be updated for NOTAMs, and for that, we cannot wait for a 28 days cycle. So we need a way more accurate database. We also need obstacle information. Obviously the terrain, this is something like pretty standard. But then you have some temporary or new obstacles such as cranes, antennas, and so on. Obviously, we also need the runway data, pretty much similar to the ERAC. So it's about TORA, ASDA, landing distance available, slopes, and so on and so on. And most importantly, it has to be aircraft related. So the way we're going to talk about this deep in the next slides, but basically what I mean here is that each aircraft must have their own obstacle clearance for their own engine failure procedures. So it makes that the airport database way more changeable and must be updated at a very regular basis. So when you compare to ERAC, which has a cycle of 28 days, the performance database must be updated daily or almost daily. So how is the airport database created? So the provider starts with the airport database, which has an airport, the runways, all the distances, and it will, for each aircraft, plot some AOCs or engine failure procedures. For this typical aircraft, it will use those routes and those procedures to gather some obstacles, which will be added to the airport database. And then once we have this database and those obstacles, we must keep them up to date. So that's why the provider has a 24-hour NOTAM watch and to monitor all those changes in runway length, obstacles, coordinates, height, length, and so on and so on. And the provider processes about 70,000 NOTAMs every day. So now, as you can see, we have a pretty complete airport database. We've got some main information. We add some obstacles and some procedure. We monitor them. And once this is done, the provider sends us the database to all servers. And this is where the interesting part starts. We're not just simply using this database. We also do the part of the job. So we add additional data that will be, for example, countries, cities, coordinates, magnetic variation, and so on and so on. So we add a bunch of data to the airport database. We also generate our on runway exits that are not present in the provider database. So this is something really VPT specific. We have, as I said, we added the variation of where the airport is located. And for that, we have a 31-day watch, 31-day monitoring system for the variation. And we also do a part of the job for the NOTAMs. You might ask, like, yeah, but why would you need to monitor the NOTAMs if the provider is already doing it? Well, we're going a step a bit further. So the provider will implement all the NOTAMs. So you will have all the NOTAMs included, but the provider will only refer to the NOTAM as an ID. So you have a NOTAM has its own ID to be referring the list of NOTAMs. And so the provider refers there only by ID. What we do is that we extend the information to incorporate the full text of the NOTAM. Finally, we also have our own 24 hours or NOTAM watch for runway closures. That means we have script turning twice a day that will add and update all the runway that are closed in the world. And that finally creates the database, airport database that you will have access to. Now, let's talk about some categories of level, because this sounds, of course, very nice. See all the word updated, but this requires a lot of resources. And this is why the provider has labeled the airports with some categories. So you have level 1 airports, which will be all the airports used by real operators, which are mainly huge hubs, but also some regional airports, which will be updated with the AIRACs and the NOTAMs. So this is a full update of the airport. Level 2 is AIRAC only. So that means we're going to follow that cycle we saw before of 28 days. And so you have major updates like runway length and so on. But you will not have any temporary obstacles or temporary reduction in length included. Level 3 and 4 have basic information for runway length. And finally, level 5 are airports not updated with the latest AIRAC cycle. So that will be from very remote airport that nobody is interested in. So they are at level 5. The important thing to understand is that the major airport will be covered in level 1 or level 2 for sure. There's a way, of course, from the provider to improve airport and increase the category of the monitoring. But this is, of course, requires a lot of resources and won't be included for all airports. And you can expect that at some point we're gonna do some polls and request all the airports that you think should be included, or at least monitor a bit more than they are. And we're gonna ask and coordinate with the provider to increase gently the levels of the airports monitored. But even for level 5 airport, which is not up to date, remember that VPT also checks for runway closure for all the airports. So there will still be a bit of monitoring, for those small airports. So let's move on now with a small example of a very standard monitor airport. This is a screenshot from VPT, just to give you an example. This airport, at the time of the screenshot, doesn't have any NOTAMs, but you can already see a few features of this new airport database. So this is Charleroi Airport. Echo Bravo Charlie India, we have the IATA code. Runway 24 has been selected to import elevation to 606 feet. And as you can see here, there's already a new things, which is the PANS ops procedure. And you have also the TERPS procedure available. So this aircraft is categorized as PANS ops, which for you means that for the performance calculation, especially on the landing, the missed approach cam gradient would be, the standard missed approach cam gradient would be 2.5%. Where if you fly to United States and a few other countries, I don't remember all of them by heart, they use the TERPS procedure, and those will have a 3.3% percent gradient for the missed approach, which is equivalent to 200 feet per nautical mile. As you can see, we have a bit of more information. We have the location. You can see the city and the country of that airport. You have the coordinates of the airport. You have this new variation that I was talking about, and you can see that it's been monitored with the 2023 worldwide database for the magnetic variation on Earth. A quick reminder of the procedure, which is a PAN ops. And here, as you can see, there's this NOTAM monitoring system. You can check if your airport is updating itself or not. So the first one, the runway closure, is VPT based, so it will always be a yes. However, the 24/7 NOTAM watch is on the provider side and might be included or not. As you can see here in Charleroi, it is monitored 24/7 for any changes. Next, I would like to do some demonstration by going to the tool, and we're going to have a look at 4 examples of NOTAMs. The first one we're going to look is Brussels 25 left NOTAM SIP. So this is VPT 1.0.0. We're not going to dive too much in it in this video, but I wanted to show you the NOTAM for runway 25 left. Like you see, the 25 left standard is available, and you have a 25 left with a NOTAM. There's no indent here. It's only written NOTAM, and you're gonna quickly understand why it is only written NOTAM. So we select the runway, and the airport info is now available. So this is Brussels National Airport, and as you can see here, we have some active NOTAMs. The NOTAM says that it cannot find NOTAM information. The status is active, so the NOTAM is active, but it couldn't find any NOTAM information. So why is that? If you look at the runway commands, it says that this NOTAM is referring a supplementary procedure with all the references. And so those are not possible to implement. So this is why you only can see there's a NOTAM in place. And you have to go into the SIP with those references to find the exact changes to that runway. So this is one example of a NOTAM. Let's go now to London Heathrow, runway 09 right, where there's a NOTAM with an identification code of Alpha 4196-23. So we go to London Heathrow, 09 right, and you can see here there's an ident for the NOTAM. Again, opening the airport information, and we'll have a look at the active NOTAM, and there it is. Alpha 4196-23, it's the status is active, and you can see there's there's an obstacle with a new crane. I have the coordinates, some information about the height, and so on and so on. So this obstacle has been updated, and it is part of the obstacle list here. It is not possible to identify which one exactly is that obstacle. Maybe you can compare with a standard routing, but it is included for the performance. So again, you can choose using the runway 09 with a NOTAM or simply without. This is mainly useful if the NOTAM has an expiration date and it might not be applicable anymore. Then you can simply use the standard runway 09 for your departure. Let's have a look at KLX, Los Angeles, runway 07 right and 25 left, which is closed. As you can see here, I have already some runway that are closed. So let's take 07 right, just for the example. And here we have the reference to the NOTAM, stating that from the 5th of September 2023 up to the 8th of September, the runway 07 right and 25 left are closed daily between 07 and 30 at 13:30 Zulu time. So as you can see, it is closed, but only at some time. So it is always important to check the NOTAM and the validity of it. So despite the runway being closed in the system, you can still use it for your calculation. So this is only a trigger for you to check the NOTAM and confirm if the runway is closed or not. And if because you're still like in the flight simulator, if you don't want to follow the NOTAM, you can still use your runway 07 right as normal. And moving next to Hong Kong, Victor Hotel, where we have a NOTAM Alpha 0820-23. Zero for left and with the associated NOTAM ID. As you can see here, it is from the 1st of September until the 25th of September. And you see this multiple marine and land obstacle project along the runway 07 left, and so on and so on, some information about those obstacles. So again, those obstacles will be depicted in the list below. So as you can see, it is a very extended airport database with a lot of updates, a lot of useful information centralized inside the tool, which I think is pretty cool. You don't necessarily need to open up all the NOTAMs or look up for them. Everything is included at one place. You can have a look at them and assess which runway you will use for your takeoff and the associated restriction, like any additional obstacles. Moving on, let's talk about engine failure. So the purpose of an EOSITO engine failure procedure is as stated right here. The primary purpose of an engine out procedure is to ensure the safety and continued control of the aircraft. That sounds very terrible. So basically what this means is the next point. An engine failure procedure is simply there to bring you safely to MSA or to a safe holding area. It assures that by following the procedures, you have an obstacle clearance during all the maneuvers, and also the procedure could include some speed restriction to limit your turn radius and keep you safe from some of the obstacles. I don't want to make a full video of the engine failure procedure, but we're going to still dive in a bit into the theory, just for you to understand what's behind. And I think this is pretty important as a pilot, whatever you are a real pilot or a virtual pilot, understanding the engine failure procedure very critical. And I can assure that even some real pilots don't always get the full idea behind it. So AOC and obstacles. I've been asked a lot, yeah, but why can't I just give you the text of the procedure and you can implement in your tool and I'll be super happy with it? Yes and no, because an engine failure procedure is a text that gives you a guidance how to fly a route. But the point of this route is to gather some obstacles. And the obstacles are a combination of a height and distance from your takeoff. And of course, you can't assure that you will fly exactly the same route. So you need to have some margin there. So you have to allow some margins for the worst case turn, the best case turn, the drop of the lift during turns, the wingspan with a low wing clearance for obstacles, and so on and so on. Let's dive into a practical example so you can understand. So we're gonna simply go here to Victor November Kilo Tango, which is an airport at Kathmandu. Runway 02 has been selected, so we are facing southbound right here, so that direction is south, behind is north. And as you can see, runway 02 has been selected and the path, the running axis is in yellow right here. So as you can imagine, if you have an engine failure and you proceed straight ahead, you might have some issue with the terrain clearance. I'm not even sure with the height of this mountain that you can clear them with two engines. So with a single engine, you might not be able to take off due to performance restriction for the single engine obstacle clearance phase. Or at best, maybe if they are not that high, you could clear them, but at the minimum weight. And commercial operation is all about carrying passenger or cargo in exchange of money. So if you are restricted to fly from Kathmandu at empty weights, that will not be very profitable operations. So we need to find a solution. And the solution is the engine failure procedure, or AOC. So we need to find a way to escape from this region right here and to bring the aircraft safely to a place or above MSA. So in this example, we're gonna assume that after takeoff, in case of engine failure, so let's say we have an engine failure at V1, you continue, and the procedures state that you have to make a left turn. So you take off and you start to make your left turn. First of all, the how you will make the left turn is pretty crucial. If you start accelerating the turn, your turn radius, which is directly proportional to your speed, will increase. And as you can see here in the red, that line is quite a wide turn and it brings you to some other obstacles right here. There's some mountains right here. So you have to make sure that your path in all possible conditions will remain as short as possible. But you still have to make sure that the best and worst case scenarios are covered. So what would be the best case scenario for the turn? So let's say you're in the aircraft, you make a left turn after departure, like here. You make a left turn and you lose your left engine. Then you're flying single engine with a thrust asymmetry. The right engine, you're in the bank, the right engine here will produce thrust and actually will help you for the turn. So that will reduce the radius of the turn here in that case. So you'll be in this situation right here. Let's say if you lose the other engines, if you lose the outbound engine in the turn, so you're turning left, you lose your right engine, so you have, again, some thrust asymmetry. But in that case, the engine, which is like in the turn, will work against your turn. It will try to move you away from the turn. So this is the worst case scenario, as you can see in red, or like a wider circle right here. On top of that, you have to take into account the loss of lift, because your wings, the lift is it's a vector always as perpendicular to the wing. And so if you in the turn, your pointer will go on the side, and your vertical component of the lift would be smaller. So you lose some performance, you lose some climb gradient capability in the turn. So the more you turn in the engine failure procedure, the more gradient you lose. So of course, this is all about a compromising situation. And this is why we have to check all the best and worst case scenarios. Now, okay, you're in the turn, but the wingspan has an impact as well, because okay, you're in the turn, but the longer your wing, the lower the low wing is, and the closer it is to obstacles. So now you have to calculate your obstacle clearance of 35 feet based on the left wing position of the left turn. So as you can see, it's already started to be very complicated, and there's a bunch more parameters to it. And the provider analyzes all the airports that have been operated to. And in the case of a very restricted performance, in the case of a standard procedure, which is straight ahead, in that case, if it's very restricted, it has to come up with some procedure to improve your maximum takeoff weight out of the runway 02 here in Kathmandu. So he ran a different type of simulation, different routes, different restriction to come up with the highest maximum takeoff weight possible. So as you can see, we talk about the obstacle being a reference with the height and distances. And indeed, if you follow this route, you're turning left. Once you arrive right here, you do have some obstacles, but they are quite far away if you fly the whole procedure up to this point. So those obstacles will have a less impact. They still might be very restrictive, depending on the height of the terrain. So let's say if you have this high terrain right here, that will be very restricted. But the further away the obstacle is, the less it has impact on your performance. That means also if you say we're going to do the same takeoff on runway 02, but with a right turn, let's say we're going to make a right turn to join eastbound procedure, we're going to hit those terrain way quicker. The distance will be much smaller, and those obstacles will have a much bigger impact on your performance. So we have now simulated all the best and worst case scenario. We have all those lines, and so we have to take the width of the path you can expect. So you might be somewhere in between this line and this line by following the procedure. We have to take into account all the obstacles within this region. So this is why you cannot simply use a text version. If your text says you turn left and the other text says you turn right, the obstacle database will be completely different. And finally, let's say for the final example, let's say that you have this procedure, you're going eastbound, and those terrain here a bit higher than they are actually here. Let's say it's this kind of mountains that you have right here. Those will become very restricted, very limiting for your performance. So you might also decide to shorten the procedure and pick up a hold somewhere here. That way, because you stay in this area, you will not have to account for obstacles further down the road. So this is why it's extremely important to follow the engine failure procedure. But we're going to get into that in a few slides. Just to stay on the theory part, let's have a look I'm gonna remove myself. Here for the takeoff flight path, you might maybe already know this, but maybe not. So the takeoff flight path is split in 4 segments, segment 1, 2, 3, and 4. And all those segments have some restriction, some mandatory performance for an aircraft, depending the type of the number of engines it has. So the first segment starts at 35 feet. So you're just airborne, and this is your first segment. What happens after liftoff? You will retract your gear. So the first segment, it's all about gear retraction. The first segment ends when the gear is up and locked. From there, you have, of course, a better climb gradient, as you can see right here. This is the second segment. The second segment is basically to get as much high as possible to clear the obstacles. By default, it's 800 feet above airport level. Some airlines, like the one I worked before, used 1,000 feet. And at some places, the acceleration height is actually variable because you're a bit restricted. So then the height is calculated accordingly for the other obstacles. So in this configuration, you have flaps extended, gear is up, and you basically climb up till reaching your acceleration height or altitude. From there starts the third segment. As you can see, it's a level segment. This is the acceleration one. So now we're going to accelerate and retract all the flaps on schedule. Once the flaps are up, we're on the final segment, and we can continue the climb up to the MSA or the minimum hold altitudes, depending the situation and the engine failure procedure. As you can see, there's some margin. You have the gross flight path that is required. Sorry. And then for below, you have the net path. So you have a bit of margin between the gross flight path and what the real flight path that you will have. So you get some margin there. And the net flight path must be with at least 35 feet of margin from the highest obstacle along the path. You can see here, that's 35 feet. So in order to assure that, there you have the tables, and the tables are based on the next slides. So this is the ICAO rules. For each segment, you must have some sort of gradients. Like let's see, for the 2 engine, for the 737, the first segment you may just have to maintain your height or be positive. So at least maintain the height until your gear is up. The second segment you have to be at least 2.4%. Third segment, remember, this is the acceleration one. So we do not climb, we retract the flaps, we accelerate. So you have to be simply positive. That means do not climb, maintain your level, or make a gentle climb. So be slightly positive. And the final segment of 1.2. As you can see, the more engine you have, the higher the requirement is. The big difference with 2-engine aircraft is that when you lose 1 engine, then you lose 50% of the thrust. And the 4-engine aircraft, if you lose 1 engine, you lose 25% of your thrust. But the 2-engine aircraft are usually overpowered, so you have a lot of excess thrust on 1 engine compared to a 4-engine aircraft. So now that we've been through the boring theory, let's have a look on the standard engine failure procedure. So we've been talking about how they are created, especially the special ones that are calculated and optimized. But you also have the standard engine failure procedure, which could be named standard, basically, for example, or from all the ways. I'll be there in a second. And those standard engine failure procedure are basically there when it says, there's no marginal obstacles that will limit your takeoff. so you can simply use the standard one. There's no need for a special procedure. And what does the standard procedure means? Because yeah, of course, if this simply says standards, you have to understand what's behind it. The standard engine failure procedure is simply proceeding on runway track, climbing to MSA or higher. So that means you take off, you have an engine failure. If it's a standard procedure, you continue straight ahead and you climb to MSA. Or higher, of course, but at least to MSA. If you cannot climb to MSA because you are surrounded by terrain, then you definitely will have a special engine failure procedure. The text, the way this information is presented to you might be very different from airline to airline. There's no real standard. In the provider database, all the standard engine failure procedure are mentioned as standard STD. But you can, which means basically proceeding on runway track, climbing to MSA. You can also have this text right there as a guidance, or you can have even more detailed, like this one, maintain 244, which is the runway track, to 25 nautical miles, which is the circus of your MSA. Remember, on the chart, you have a circle of 25 nautical miles for your, and you're being given on MSA within this circle. So as long as you stay within 25 nautical miles, you'll be able to climb to the required MSA and hold. Yeah, if you don't manage to reach MSA within the 25 nautical miles, then you have basically no idea what the MSA is, because on the charts, it's only depicted up to 25 nautical miles. So this is why you enter the hold at the edge of the circle of 25 nautical miles. And when at above MFRA, accelerate and retract flaps on schedule. This is normal procedure, but is sometimes written as extra information. But all those means exactly the same thing, as you can see. Proceed on runway track, maintain 244, that's exactly the same thing. To 25 nautical miles, that's climb to MSA basically, so that's all you need here. Hold to remain within the MSA, and then that's basically a procedure that you're supposed to know. It's part of the engine failure procedure and other profile you must follow. So yeah, there it is. And one thing you must remember, and this is something that even real pilots don't realize, is that engine failure procedure, like we stated before, it's only there to bring you safely to a MSA or to a holding point. So once you're above MSA, then you can basically do whatever you want. So there's no need, like in the last one, to follow and to go to the 25 nautical miles. Once you reach MSA, your engine failure procedure is terminated, and you can be vector, you can pick up direct. As long as you're above the MSA within the 25 nautical miles radius of the airport, you'll be safe. All right, now let's talk about performance. Before VPT 1.0.0, the aircraft database was created based on, for the takeoff, mainly for the FPPM, the Flight Planning and Performance Manual, in which there are a lot of graphic that we have to plot in semi-manually mode. There are some tables that we, of course, used, and for the landing, we use, of course, as well the FPPM graph. A few notes in the FCOM. The QRH landing distances for the landing en route, and the QRH brake cooling schedule. As you can see, yeah, it would take about 1 month of work to do the takeoff, about 2 weeks for the landing. That brings us up to about 6 weeks of work, pretty intense work to add a single aircraft variant. That's a very long time. And so that means for the 737-800, when you have like 4 variants, that means you need 24 weeks of work to complete the 737-800 only. And once we have this database is available. We have our own logic, own codes or calculations to use those data and get you an output with all your performance. So let's have a look on how it worked. So this is an example of a PPM, FPPM graph. This is takeoff field limits for the dry runway for flaps 1. This is based on the 737-800 B26 engine. This is just part of the graphic, but as you can see, they have multiple lines. Here we have the airport pressure altitude. Below you have your airport temperature. And here you can't see, but you have your field length that is corrected for slopes and head or tailwinds. So we had to plot every single line right here, all the single values available for that part, for that part, for that part, and so on and so on. How does it work for the calculation part? It's pretty straightforward. You start with the airport temperature. Here an example is about 30 degrees. You go up until you reach your airport pressure altitude. This is pressure altitude. Pay attention for that. It's not elevation, it's a pressure altitude. In that example, we're just going to follow with this example. We're going to take off from airport, which is at 4,000 feet of pressure altitude. So it's very high elevation. And then once we reach that point, we're going to turn right up to the reference line. It's not very clear, but there's a reference line right here. So we put the arrow up to this reference line. From below, we're going to take the runway, the field length. So basically the takeoff distance available, or the section takeoff. We're going to correct it for the slope, and we're going to correct it for the wind, so that will move slightly right here. So let's just follow the example here. And this will go up, all the way up. From the reference point, we're going to simply follow the line. Like here, we're going to follow the line until we cross the intersection right here. And that will gives us our field limit weight, which is, you can see here, about 69 tons, which is quite low. And makes sense as well, because you are super high and your density altitude is quite low. And this part actually calculates the density altitude with the temperature and pressure altitude. So as you can see, it's really complex. But now it gets even more complex, because I see that there's a 26K option here with the flaps 1. This same graphic is available for flaps 1, flaps 5, flaps 10, flaps 15, flaps 25. For 24K, flaps 1, flaps 5, flaps 10, flaps 15, flaps 25. For 22K, flaps 1, flaps 10, 5, flaps 10, flaps 15, flaps 25. That makes a lot of graphic with a lot of plotting. And that's only for the takeoff field limit. Then you have the climb limit, then you have the obstacle limits, and all the landing parts, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this was a huge work, but not very sustainable in the long term to add more aircraft. So what's the new way with the provider? So the new way, we're going to use the SCAP file. SCAP is short for Standard Computerized Airplane Performance, which is, like the name suggests, a standardized format for performance calculation. There's basically a guidance how to use those files, and there's a guidance by the manufacturer on the aircraft-specific options. You have to visualize that as a black box that can be interrogated. Basically, you can create your request, a performance request, and you can send it to the black box. The black box will make its own calculation, and it will send you the results. So this is the principle of the SCAP file. The provider has the data for about 65 aircraft. That's quite a lot, but it's all the variants as well included. Not all of them will be included, and implementation must probably be based on the community demands and aircraft add-ons release as well. We're going to be starting with the 737 NG, so at least we have what you already have will be converted to the new system. Then the provider wants to include the classic. That will be should be a pretty quick addition. And finally, we're going to add the 737 MAX. For now, this is going to be MAX 8 and MAX 9. As the MAX 7 and 10 still must be certified at the moment of this video. And in the future, we're of course planning to add 777, 747, the 320, most probably the 787 as well, and so on, depending on the demands. I'll probably organize, once we are free to add more aircraft, we'll probably organize some poll, and you will vote for which aircraft you want next. Now let's have, as I said, that we'll have some guidance on aircraft-specific options. This is something a bit not well known, so I thought I would take this opportunity, despite maybe making the video a bit long, but I wanted to take the opportunity to explain you how it works behind the scene, and yeah, you might learn things or two that way. So let's take, for the example, let's put myself right here. So let's take an example of Boeing with a SCAP database release notes. So this is a PDF file. There's, I don't know, hundreds or something pages, maybe a bit more. This one has been extracted from the 737 MAX 8 with a LEAP 1 Bravo 28 engine. And the database version is Delta 03178. There's a lot of details, so this is just a part of one page, but it's just for you to have a quick understanding how the whole system works. You have some parameters and the available values here for takeoff, that in this page. One obvious one will be the flaps position. So you can actually have some flaps position on the 737, which makes sense. Those are the values accepted. So you can take off with flaps 1, 5, 10, 15, and 25. And that makes sense if you fly the 737, you know that. But let's take another example right below with the air conditioning. The obvious options, if you've been using VPT, you know that will be automatic or off. So are you doing a bleed on or bleed off takeoff? So those are the two options. But as you can see right here, there's a third one, which is usually not implemented, but it is available. It is a pretty quite interesting one, as you can see. I don't know any operator that use it, but it is available by Boeing to be incorporated in your performance calculation tool. So this is getting very interesting. So the third option is automatic, but off for the dimension of V1 MCG. So V1 MCG is the minimum control on the ground. And that basically means if you lose one engine during your takeoff roll, that you are able to maintain your directional control on the ground. So you're able to keep the runway axis and not finish on the grass on the side. And a small note, if you don't know that, but the V1 must be equal or higher to the VMCG. So that means, right, this option is calculating the takeoff based on the air conditioning to auto, so you have a bleed on takeoff. That means yes, a bit more restricted. For information about 737, depending a bit the rate and so on, but you might have up to like 1,000 kilos of difference between having a takeoff with all bleeds on and bleeds off. But what this option does is actually using the auto, so the most restricted one, for takeoff, but it uses off for the VMCG, which is also the most restricted one, because if you have if you have the air conditioning off, the bleed off, your engine has more thrust, and that means if you lose one engine, you have way more asymmetry. So you need a higher speed for your control to be more effective in case of engine failure to maintain the runway access. As you can see, there are a lot of different options. One also interesting one is ground spoilers. It's on the Boeing aircraft. It's always manual for takeoff, and so this is the only option available. This is usually then not implemented into a performance tool because there's only one option available, so there's no point of selecting it. And so on and so on. So this goes on for pages and pages. They explain you pretty much all the specifics, cases and restriction and temperature and so on and so on. So yeah, that's a quick note aside regarding the performance calculation. So let's move to the calculation itself and the process behind. So it all starts with VPT 1.0.0 in that case, which is the user interface, where you can select the flaps, your wind, the temperature, and so on and so on. So this is what you will be using to create your request. And VPT 1.0.0 will also interconnect your profile with the API parameters, meaning like you can change the way the data is displayed. Like you can change, let's say, engine NTIs. You can write it in full. You can write it in ENG. And so on and so on. So you can actually customize your tool, but it has to connect what you have selected that with the correct parameters in the system. So that's what VPT does as well. Once you press the calculate button, it sends to our own API. The API gets your request. It prepares the request to the provider. It converts some VPT feature to the provider options. A good example of this is the wet snow. The wet snow is not part of a list of available runway contaminants, but you can actually convert the wet snow into dry snow. So there's a table. So our API will do the conversion for you. So you'll be able to use this feature. And at the same time, we adapt that feature to the equivalent options to proceed with the calculation. So once the request has been set and ready, it is submitted to the provider. The provider will run the SCAP file based on the data received. And I'm going to go the other way around now, receiving the data. So the provider will return with the results of the calculations, or it can also return an explicit error if something is wrong. And this is why this is when it's in bold. Pay attention. It can also return invalid data computation. And this is a very annoying one because it means something went wrong and there's no way to know what went wrong. And this is linked to the SCAP file itself. So there's remember it's a black box, so there's no tweaking insight available. So if you ever encounter this kind of error, please send us an email to the main address down below with a screenshot of your request, so we can try to reproduce the error and try to fix it either in our API if we can, or in the API of the provider if we can, or at least find a solution to fix that issue for your request. So once the provider has returned the results, we are going to verify the results. So there's a lot of going on backstage. We're going to be adding the brake cooling calculation ourselves. We're going to be adding the trim calculation by ourselves. Going to format the results in user-friendly and more, I say, more complex way, meaning more. There will be a lot more data to it. And also this communication between the APIs could be multiple. So it's not only one request and one response. If you take the example of the landing en route, in flight, if you request all the available brake, auto brake options, so that means auto brake off or max manual, auto brake max, auto brake 3, 2, and 1 on the 737. That means we have to run all and communicate with the provider for every single setting. So there will be a lot of exchange here, and that will be part of the formatting result. That we're going to gather all the result into one single place. We have some extended error management as well. If you have to cross-check some weights that's not part of the provided, like flexible takeoff weight, and so on and so on. Once this is ready, we send you the results, and VPT will display the result in text or graphically. And it also converts to your units that you requested. The basic units for the calculation are kilograms and feet. That's what we get from the provider, and we make all the adjustments to visually suit your needs. So this is basically it for the overview of VPT 1.0.0. We've been through quite some extensive knowledge right here. As you can see, there's a lot of new features that will be coming along. This new airport, this newer aircraft, there'll be a lot of change. And of course, there has some pros and some cons. Like nothing is perfect. So there are some downside to the new system, and I made small tables to compare what's actually the pros and a few cons as well. So there's an impact on the customer. The pros is absolutely the accurate airport database per aircraft. That's absolutely amazing. It's something never seen before for flight simulation, and that probably never been seen in the future as well. It's absolutely a beast right here. We're gonna have spot-on results, absolutely wonderful. And we have also some additional information. I might have seen a few pictures on the Facebook and Discord. So we're gonna have now accelerated distances, accelerated stop distances, engine failure goal distances, and so on and so on. So it's absolutely wonderful, and the way it has been displayed graphically, it's just beautiful, amazing. I personally love it. On the con side, of course, yeah, there will be a lot of changes for you if you've been a long-time customer to VPT and used to the current format. There will be some changes to you. You have to take the time to adapt. But there are also new ways to customize the tool, which actually could ease this transition and actually even make the tool better for you. In the change, we can have, of course, say this MEL CDL is a bit different. The way it is represented, the NNC as well is very different compared to the previous system we had. But we have to accept it, and I try to adapt it as much as possible to have the closest experience as possible to the previous version. But there have been some limited for a few things, but it's to me it's close enough, and I'm pretty sure you will love this new version of the tool. Another downside is there will be no big customizable engine failure procedure, but I hope now you understand why it's super complex, and there's no easy way for you as a customer or as a Lambda pilot to actually get those information. It's pretty hard, and because now we work with the provider, so if we add some engine failure procedure, it is technically possible, but it requires quite some work on their side. So yeah, it's not very suitable. Not very suitable for the whole system. But I mean, like I said, it's the current engine failure procedure right here. It's a huge pro. It's very accurate. It's very optimized. So you can just use those. It's absolutely wonderful. Like I said already before, that we have some slightly different options. Like for example, on the 737, we used to have the 26, 24, 22K options. Then now the labels, the layout will be slightly different. It's going to be 26 for the engine, derated to the 24. But that can be actually solved and adapted in the Fleet app. So you can actually change that and customize the tool for your needs. So it is kind of solved with this Fleet app. Another downside is some aircraft variant may not be available, at least not straight away. Think about the 737-600, which is not available in those 65 aircraft, but we do have the file, so it can be implemented in the, I'll say, near future, in a couple of months, that could be implemented. We might lose a few, one or two maybe, 737-700 variants, very specific ones, but we do have a lot of them still, so I mean it's still very acceptable solution. And the new airport process is a bit more complicated. So before, when I can actually update it myself an airport or add a new airport by myself, it would take me maybe half an hour to do so. Now if you want to add a new airport, there's some process behind before adding. We have to if it doesn't exist, we have to create that, use some legal available data. And then depending on the urgency, we need to update them with a 24/7 NOTAM watch. Everything's very complicated. So it is still possible, and we'll still add airports, but the process is a bit slightly longer than it was before. But to me, you can leave a comment below of what you think about it. But to me, this new interface and this all new options, new information, this new airport database is just wonderful, and it's clearly wins compared to the few items right here, which is basically a few. You can solve by to customize a few options and just to get used to the layout of the new system, of the new wording. All right, now let's talk money. Some company might not be like to talk money, but we have nothing to hide, and this collaboration, of course, has some impact on all sides, and as you can see right here, the collaboration will cost us quite some money every month, but we think that it's really worth the cost to bring us this amazing new level of realism into the world of flight simulation. And the good news for you is that we will implement that at no extra cost for you. And I hope this shows the commitment of the team to bring you the best performance tool for your flight simulator. We are really committed to that. And also, I hope you understand that having such a professional tool at that levels, with a real performance and daily updated airports database, cannot be a one-time purchase. So we have to keep this subscription plan, just like Navigraph does with their AIRAC and charts. All right, guys, this is it for today's video. So it's a bit longer than I expected, but we have covered the big line of the big changes of VPT. We talked about a new airport database. I hope now you have a deep understanding how everything works and the work we put behind it. We talk about the performance, so how we used to calculate it before in the pre-VPT 1.0.0 versions and how it will be calculated now. And we have a view a bit of the NOTAM monitoring system. And in the next videos, we're going to focus on the main focus will be on the demonstration. So we're going to talk about the takeoff dispatch, the landing dispatch, the landing en route, the brand new weight and balance system, the new virtual dispatcher. We'll have a demonstration of the fleet app, and we're going to reveal the surprise I've been talking about for quite some time. So we're going to reveal that, and I think you will like it. A quick note, of course, those videos might not be released in that exact order, but all of them will be released prior to the full release of VPT 1.0.0. So this is it, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button. If you want to watch more videos like this and be advised when the next one is available, subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or if you have any suggestions for what we can do with this channel about performance or more generally in aviation, flight simulation, just leave a comment with your suggestion. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.